Slamming NATO over the war in Ukraine. The Pope is questioning the war's causes, saying the Kremlin was provoked by the, quote, barking of NATO at Russia's door. This is the Pope is requesting a meeting with Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Joining us now, author, executive editor, and Washington bureau chief for Catholic cable network EWTN. Good to see you, Matthew. We appreciate it. Sure feels like the Pope is taking sides, doesn't it?
It's very clear that Pope Francis has been criticized a bit over the last month or so for not referencing Vladimir Putin by name. Well, he certainly is now doing that. And he's certainly making very clear that while he's willing to go to any length necessary, including a trip to Moscow, that he is demanding that the war stop first. And it has implications certainly for Catholic Orthodox relations. Looking at the B-roll right there of the Pope with Patriarch Kirill. Pope wants to advance the relationship with the Orthodox Church, but first and foremost is the diplomatic outreach to Vladimir Putin.
What do we make of this sort of appeasement of Putin, at least verbally saying that NATO was barking at Russia's door? That is the Kremlin's talking point. If the Pope is parroting that, how does Catholics in Ukraine and around the rest of the Western world not believe he's taking the Kremlin side?
Well, I think what we're seeing is the Holy Father actually echoing an important point that he's willing to go so far in dealing with Vladimir Putin. In other words, he is saying that was Russia provoked? Well, I think the eastward expansion of NATO was a concern for a lot of people. But Pope Francis is also making it clear that he wants this war to stop, and he wants to be involved diplomatically in trying to make that happen. So a concession such as the one he made regarding NATO, I think he sees as a gesture to Vladimir Putin as a way of trying to get to Moscow. Whether the Pope is going to succeed in that will remain to be seen. But let's not underestimate the willingness of Pope Francis to engage in diplomatic efforts. He has asked the Secretary of State for the Vatican, Cardinal Secretary of State Pietro Parolin, to give forceful gestures. He himself has gone to the Russian embassy. So Pope Francis, I think, is trying to make a gesture.
So the words are the gesture, if you will, but I don't know, Marnie, when you sort of heard that in that stark sense, you kind of
I guess Matthew, my response to that is if his mission, which you would believe it to be, is to stop the war, stop the bloodshed of innocent civilians, then doesn't it dilute that message by making the comment about NATO? I mean, this isn't a situation where even the Pope can play both sides. I mean, there's right and wrong. There's evil and there's not. And you question
I think that's something,
why the diplomacy behind making that conscious decision and saying that.
Well, the Pope himself, I think, is at great risk, and he knows this, of severely damaging the Catholic Orthodox dialogue. So hovering in this entire crisis is also the relationship between the Catholic Church and the Russian Orthodox Patriarchate of Moscow. He, in fact, many see it as an insult of sorts to Patriarch Kirill in referencing him as Putin's altar boy. So these are turns of phrase that Francis often uses as a way of engagement with those he's trying to dialogue with. But I think Pope Francis continues to be very focused on one thing, and that is trying to get himself in front of Vladimir Putin in Moscow, if it's possible. He's dismissed the idea temporarily of going to Ukraine. He has sent major representatives to the most important cardinals to Ukraine as a gesture of solidarity with Ukraine. He's talked with President Zelensky. Now, Francis, I think, is trying to open that dialogue with Vladimir Putin. Whether it succeeds again is an open question. And I think that Vladimir Putin is very reluctant to meet with Pope Francis.
Yeah, no, understandably, or perhaps interestingly enough, depending on how much he views what the Pope said in good faith. Hey, Matthew, we always appreciate you being with us. Thank you.
Good to be with you, as always.
Yeah, you have to wonder how much.
Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.